and I've said this before, but it's worth saying again, is that the question of where liberalism becomes effectively decadent is one of the things that
We've been talking about this for quite some time.
it's been one of the subjects of the time, in a way, one of the deep substrate subjects. Does ever more rights lead to a sort of decadence that then leads to you being vulnerable to take over by totalitarian or extremist ideology? And that's something a lot of people have thought about. But one of the great things I've observed during the war has been this way in which actually, there is a type of freedom, because freedom isn't an unalloyed good, but there is a type of freedom that it is perfectly possible that people can will themselves to fight for, and it's worth it. That it's worth it. And I've seen huge sacrifice by the young men and women of Israel, particularly for people of all ages. I've seen huge sacrifice, but it's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it whichever way you look at it. Whether you want to look at this as an atheist liberal, it's worth it. Much better to fight for the right of the kids to dance at a dance party than to fight for the rights of the people who would come in and rape and kill them. But it's also worth it because these people know what they're fighting for, and they know they're fighting for their faith, for their family, for their society, for their future. And so, yes, it has probably changed me the last year and a half. And I would say it's my honor and privilege that, among other things, it's probably changed me for the better.
Douglas Murray warns the anti-Israel hate on campus is a dress rehearsal for attacking America. He scoffs at defeating death cults with dialogue, demanding the same unconditional surrender that crushed Imperial Japan. As a demographic conquest unfolds, Murray exposes a rigged game where our own elites fund our enemies. How much longer will we tolerate this fifth column and our leaders' pathetic death wish?
What would you say to somebody who's watching this, who's going, well, I just don't care about the Middle East, and I live in the middle of America, and I don't really care that much about the UK, and I don't really care that much about Europe and everything else. Like, why should I care about any of this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfectly reasonable thing. I mean, Americans in general have several bits of enormous luck,
Especially we're going to take Canada now, so we'll have a nice buffer
Absolutely,
up north.
that'd be a good buffer zone.
Yeah.
America is lucky in her neighbors, lucky in her geography, lucky in not having been ever having faced a serious land invasion since the foundation. And so for most Americans, the situation of Israel, for instance, in being invaded and with two death cults trying to actually annihilate it simultaneously from the north and from the south seems a world away. I mean, there's lots of reasons to care about abroad, even if you're not that interested in it. But I would say the main one for Americans I try to bring across in Democracies and Death Cults is clearly this isn't just about Israel. I mean, clearly, and I have a sort of good standard on this, which is, if I can say so myself, which is, find me a pro-Hamas, anti-Israel protest in America that has anyone carrying an American flag. Yeah. Find me a protest of that ilk that ever finishes with the singing of the Star-Spangled Banner.
Right.
There hasn't been one. There never will be one.
Or how about if it was a pro-Palestinian protest, then someone condemning Hamas, let's say, and at least
never
saying,
happened.
Right, you'd get lynched.
There's a brave young Iranian in London who occasionally turned out the anti-Israel protests with a sign saying Hamas is a terrorist organization, which is a designation by almost all Western governments. And every single time the pro-Palestinian protesters attacked him physically. And that should tell us something about this movement. But just to go back to this thing, nobody who does those anti-Israel protests is pro-American. Mm-hmm. They're not. In the same way that you'll notice that the pro-Israel protests that do sometimes happen, the pro-Israel rallies that have happened occasionally in America and elsewhere, they're always filled not just with Israeli flags, but American flags. And if you go to any of the small number of pro-Israel rallies in, say, Britain, They all finish with, they always have, Israeli flags and British flags, and they finish with the singing of Hatikva, the Israeli national anthem, and the singing of God Save the King. It is impossible to conceive of a pro-Palestinian
Yeah.
protest finishing with the singing of God Save the King. That tells us something. That tells us something. In fact, maybe it tells us everything. These people hate Israel first, but they hate America and the rest of the West next. And they're coming for the rest of us next. And therefore, we should decide whether we have a benign and tolerant attitude toward these people or not.
As Douglas Murray masterfully explains, the hatred isn't just for Israel, it's a dress rehearsal. These campus mobs are often organised by groups like Samidoun, which is so cosy with the PFLP terror group that it is banned in Germany. They chant against Israel today, but they're aiming for America tomorrow. How much longer will we tolerate this fifth column?
And I think we should not have a benign attitude towards them, and we should not be overly tolerant of them either.
So how do you defeat a death cult then? Because the meme out there, at least on the left, is something like, well, you can't defeat an idea anyway. It's just impossible.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's such an impossible and difficult thing to destroy the ideology of Hamas, isn't it? I mean, Hamas having been around for millennia, of course.
But there is this idea that, okay, you kill enough of them and then more of them rise.
Yeah, all of this is said by people who've never been anywhere near conflict and don't understand anything about conflict. And first of all, you can defeat Hamas. And the IDF has spent the last year and a half doing so. People who say you can't defeat a death cult, first of all, are being defeatist by definition. And secondly, don't realize that you can. And I would give many examples from history, but perhaps one which is one of the less used but is very, very important is just look at the ideology in Imperial Japan until 1945. This was an ideology which had been in place for centuries and very, very deep-rooted. And, as you know, the Allies, when they're moving through the Pacific, just always thought, this is an entire population that's willing to kill and die for the emperor. Well, Imperial Japan was defeated and utterly defeated. And once it knew it was defeated, it actually had the opportunity to reboot. And now Japan is among the community of nations and a great ally, and the death cult that was there in Imperial Japan is effectively dead. Fine. Same thing can happen with Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and all the others. And they're much easier to defeat than Imperial Japan was. And they are infinitely easier to defeat. But in order for it to happen, they have to know they've lost. It's not just they have to be killed in large numbers. It's not just they have to be defeated on the battlefield. They have to be defeated in the realm of ideas, which shouldn't be the hardest one. It should be the easiest one. But they also have to know they've lost. And that's why, I'm very excited by the suggestions that President Trump has put out about Gaza, because fresh thinking is going to be needed. But I don't see any reason why, if a group of people, in this case the Arabs in Gaza, elect a death cult to rule them in Hamas, and that death cult launches war upon its neighbors, I don't see why they get to keep the territory from which they wage war. I think they should lose the territory, and I think they will. And once they've lost territory, perhaps in time they'll realize that they've lost in other ways. This isn't impossible at all. The people who say that it's impossible to destroy a death cult have never seen a death cult destroyed. And they don't know the good work that can be done by democracies in destroying them.
You can't defeat an idea? What cowardly nonsense. Ask the ghosts of Imperial Japan. We didn't beat their death cult with dialogue. We beat it with unconditional surrender after turning their cities to ash. Hamas, whose charter calls for our annihilation, is a pathetic sequel. They require utter humiliating defeat, not a two-state solution. When will we learn that some rabid dogs must be put down?
Let me just ask you one or two other things. So how concerned would you be that some of this is just a numbers game, that they're multiplying faster, that there's more of them, and I mean that in the Middle East, but I mean that in your country, I mean that in my country, that it's just, there's a numbers issue here for sure, just in terms of reproduction and the focus on the ideology.
Well, there's
where Western people focus on different things?
it's possible. It's possible. I mean, just look at the numbers game in a country like Britain, a city like London, and you might well be quite bleak about the outlook. However, it's not only about numbers. In the Middle East, the one Jewish state is vastly outnumbered, but it's not losing. So there is not just the thing of numbers. Numbers matter a great deal. But what matters perhaps much more is what you're fighting for. It's what you're fighting for. Now, I believe in a fair contest. The people who are flying the stupid flags near where we're sitting saying trust in Allah, in a fair fight between them and my history, my people, my past, I don't think they have a chance. We're not going to fall into the hands of these idiots. Not going to. We've got much better story, a much better past, a much better literature, a much better culture. There's a reason why you don't see people fleeing from the West to enter Muslim countries.
Right.
Because it just doesn't work to govern society. It's not successful. It could be in some rare examples, but... So no, I don't think in a fair fight that's going to win at all. Not at all.
The numbers game. It's a slow-motion conquest by demographics. While Westerners debate their pronouns, Europe's Muslim fertility rate of 2.6 quietly steamrolls the native 1.6. Murray rightly boasts of our superior culture, but we're too busy apologising for it to defend it. This isn't a fair fight, it's a siege from within. Why are we funding the very schools that teach our children to hate us?
Question then is, to go back to where we started, will it be a fair fight?
Right.
And we have many politicians in the West and many hucksters and campaigners and others who want to make sure it's not a fair fight. That I'm effectively not, and people like me are not allowed to argue our case, and that other people with a really rancid and rotten case are allowed to push it without any pushback. And if that was to happen, then there could be a case that they could win. But I'm in a fair fight. No way, no way, no way. No chance. No more chance than that the neighbors of Israel will succeed in wiping out Israel.
Let me ask you one other thing, which is usually how I end all of our interviews, with something somewhat personal. But in this last year and a half, I mean, you've sort of become a hero to the Jews. You've been a kind of hero of the people that love the West for a long time. But you were out there. I mean, you immediately were on the border with Gaza. You went up to the north as Hezbollah was firing rockets. You've been in the middle of this thing, truly. I mean, physically in the middle of this thing. How has any of this changed you, or even fighting for this in such an immediate way, as opposed to writing a book about it and then it's a little bit distant? I mean, you've really been in the center of this thing.
Yeah, well, I sort of think it's as a writer's duty to do that. That, I have a certain disdain for the people who talk about things and don't see them. I think it's very important to see things that you're writing about, that you're thinking about. I suppose it has changed me, and it's not really possible for me to say exactly how. It's certainly had a huge impact on me, seeing the war up close. But really, much more than that, it's been seeing the response. And seeing the response up close has filled me with huge encouragement. Huge encouragement.
The game is rigged. While our leaders gut our defences, Western-funded NGOs and universities actively champion our enemies. They don't want a debate. They want to silence us, labelling defence as hate speech, while cheering on actual genocidal maniacs. This isn't a battle of ideas. It's a war against our own elite's pathetic death wish. Why are we letting them fight for the other side?
And I've said this before, but it's worth saying again, is that the question of where liberalism becomes effectively decadent is one of the things that...
We've been talking about this for quite some time.
It's been one of the subjects of the time, in a way, one of the deep substrate subjects. does ever more rights lead to a sort of decadence that then leads to you being vulnerable to take over by totalitarian or extremist ideology? And that's something a lot of people have thought about. But one of the great things I've observed during the war has been this way in which actually, there is a type of freedom, because freedom isn't an unalloyed good, but there is a type of freedom that it is perfectly possible that people can will themselves to fight for, and it's worth it. That it's worth it. And I've seen huge sacrifice by the young men and women of Israel, particularly for people of all ages. I've seen huge sacrifice, but it's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it whichever way you look at it. Whether you want to look at this as an atheist liberal, it's worth it. Much better to fight for the right of the kids to dance at a dance party than to fight for the rights of the people who would come in and rape and kill them. But it's also worth it because these people know what they're fighting for, and they know they're fighting for their faith, for their family, for their society, for their future. And so, yes, it has probably changed me the last year and a half. And I would say it's my honor and privilege that, among other things, it's probably changed me for the better.
As always, it is my honor and privilege, my friend.
So, any thoughts on what Douglas Murray just discussed? Share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you never miss any of our future debates.